Hi guys, welcome back to another Kapo Starky podcast. Today with me, I've got Keith Lewis of RugbyRefereenet. He also does the Advantage Over podcast. He's been a referee since 1996. Is that right? About 96?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, makes me feel old. Yeah.
Wow. And I thought it would be a great pleasure to have him on today. We're just going to talk about rugby refereeing, where we think the game's at these days, and a little bit about himself as well, how he got into refereeing and such. But that is my first question. Keith, how are you? And how did you get into rugby refereeing?
Great. So thanks, Carl. Really appreciate you having me on to chat about this sort of thing. I say we can probably talk plenty of stuff about refereeing over the next couple of minutes. So yeah, plenty of good stuff. Yeah, everything's well in my world. How did I get into refereeing? Well, actually, I played through school. Actually, I was one of those where I was probably not going to be a very good player. And then at school, I did my backing, playing in the hooking in a scrum, and I just lost my confidence. Moved schools at the same time, and ended up in a school in South Wales where I was only doing. I kind of had to be in full time, but I was only doing 2.5 A levels back then. So I had a bit of free time. One of the PE staff was scouting around for people to help doing the helping with the inter-house rugby tournament. So I thought volunteer, kill some time, started refereeing that sort of thing. And then suddenly thought, well, this could be a thing. So I called someone at the WRU and said, have you got any courses I can do to do this a bit more? And yeah, haven't really stopped since then.
Yeah, I can relate to some degree on the playing side. I was a bit of a coward when it came to the contact of sport and hurt myself as well. Nothing serious, I just never got back into it. But yeah, no, it is like quite interesting, like with regards to courses and that. You say, I think they are there. You just kind of got to push yourself out to find them. Because I was similar with the SRU. I just put online and I looked up online because I was interested in getting into refereeing. But yeah, no. So
I think it's definitely getting easier for people out there interested in doing it. There's plenty. There are now more resources out there to try and get people in. But I think the game realizes that referees don't grow on trees; they don't just appear randomly. So they've got to do a bit of promo to do it, and that's one of the reasons we set up the website all those years ago, to try and just start to bring some of those conversations together and try and help people get going. Really.
Yeah, and also because when you started, I imagine as well, obviously no social media about the time the game was just going professional as well. So yeah,
sure. And I think that's it was a really great setting for me. I mean, I started refereeing at uni. So when I went so I did my A levels, then went to uni, and that's when I'd really started to do refereeing properly. So doing 3 games a week, 50, 60 games a season, doing sort of uni games, kids on a Sunday morning of different levels, club rugby as well on Saturday. And it's great grounding and really good opportunity to get out there and do stuff without, I guess, the hassle of social, and I mean that's also my day job. So I am a social media manager for an insurance company. So I completely love social media. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, but it obviously has downsides as well, and it can be a tricky arena for people to negotiate, particularly as a match official when you're in the middle of an emotive sport, and match officials at all levels. And I guess that's coming down. In the past, you always got your international guys or your premiership guys or whatever level whatever country you're in. We're always going to get some grief in the papers because that's just life. And now I guess social has brought that into everybody. Everyone's got a view and an opinion on everything, and they don't seem to have a filter in how that pans out. But I think the opportunities that social have for rugby and for refereeing, and to make people like us human, and to be, I guess, be part of a game in a different way is really helpful and can be really positive. We just got to embrace it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I think I agree with you. That's one of the benefits of social media, but also, as you alluded to, has its downsides, especially if you're in a higher profile game. After a bad game, like the hassle you could get from keyboard warrior experts who think they know more than you. I've probably been the good warrior myself sometimes. So
or even if you've had a good game, of course, depending on whose definition of good and bad depends on the score line more often than not, or the seesaw of a controversial decision. And we see that week after week. We've got these big issues that are marked up as controversial, or actually nowadays they're getting less and less controversial. They're still big decisions, but that's just the way it is, isn't it?
Yeah, with regards to controversial, I find that depends who you speak to. There'll be plenty plenty of folk who will look, and obviously with regards to the internet as well, there's always video footage or photos that are always manipulated to make it look not always honestly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but yeah, with regards to refereeing, obviously with all that side of it, what would you say you love about it? You probably touched on it a bit already, but
what refereeing has done for me in the game is just brilliant. I mean, I was probably going to play club rugby if I was really lucky. If something miraculous happened, club rugby at best. But as a referee, I refereed up to championship level in the English structure, so rung below the Premiership. So I've got videos of me refereeing Sale and Exeter when they were kind of in those sort of Prem Cup early days, or when we had Northampton. One of the games I really think back to, when Northampton, if you remember, Northampton got relegated in the early days of the Premiership, and I refereed them at Birmingham Bees in the pokiest little club, traditional rugby club that we all love, that many of your listeners and watchers will associate with, the smallest changing room in the world. And you walk in there, and I had Bruce Rahana and Carlos, I forgot his name. That's the Carlos Spencer sitting there on the wooden benches, and then we go out and referee at Birmingham, and just stuff like that's brilliant. But I've done 2 rugby tours to South Africa through both London Society, and I was a member there, and then the RFU Exchange as well. I refereed at the Stockholm Tens for a couple of years. Unfortunately, bad life choice, but we got, and that's now my wedding anniversary weekend, so I kind of missed out on that. But those are opportunities that many people just wouldn't ever think to get involved in. I've refereed at Murrayfield, I've refereed at Twickenham loads of times at HQ, Cardiff Arms Park, all that kind of stuff. And that's just a brilliant way of staying involved in a game that we all love. And that's the thing, isn't it? You go around, when you've been around for a reasonable amount of time, you can go to any rugby club and you can just talk to people. You kind of get there. You got mates and faces and relationships that you probably don't know who they are, but you've met them once on a windy day in Redcar and all that kind of fun and games that that we all do. It's just great to be involved in it, and that's why I want to keep involved, and that's why I kind of do my bit now through the RugbyReferee.net and trying to get more people in on it, trying to sell refereeing as a valid part of the game. We need to get more people in and trying to help people understand what we're all about, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. But with regards to your stepping stones, because I mean, obviously you say you've refereed very, very high level. I mean, that's the level you have. Like, so what would you say was your stepping stones to there? Just lots of different coaches come and watch you and just sort of give you glowing reports and go up from there, or different opportunities, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of referees and names that you'll be familiar with have got different approaches to getting to where they've got to. For me, I was always a slow burn kind of referee. I kind of take my time, make steady progress all the way through. And if you look at my kind of the axis of refereeing, I've got a really gradual increase. And I think what I benefited from was because I was at university in Preston, so I was part of Manchester and District Society. I had a placement year in industry when I was in Luton, so I was refereed for a season in the East Midlands. I then moved to London, so I was in London Society and all the club, all the rugby that goes with that. So there was club rugby, there was the opportunity to be involved in things like the Middlesex Sevens back then. As London Society, when you're on the higher echelons of the sort of group, the cluster group there, we were involved in the really high level schools rugby. So going to Millfield and Bryanstone and those sort of Dulwich College were fantastic experiences. And I think my benefit is that having moved around in all those areas, you get to meet more people, you get different styles of rugby. So whenever you used to know when it was back up in the Northwest, when they get a Southern referee, they don't understand Northern rugby, and where I can play the Northern card. So when I was in this, I did plenty of rugby down in the Southwest, and Southwest rugby is very different to Southeast rugby, and I experienced all that. I'm always there to kind of learn from people. I had some really good relationships with some club coaches. Preston Grasshoppers, a chap called Dave Kidd and Roger Bowden, 2 fantastic people who looked after me when I was starting. And in those first 3 or 4 years, looked after me, gave me a voice. They weren't not referee people. Roger is, but Dave Kidd was the club coach. there with the age group that I kind of attached myself to for no reason whatsoever. But he was a great coach with the kids, the age group that sort of on the 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, as I kind of refereed them as they grew up. But he was always willing to talk to me about coaching, to talk to me about players, getting people in the society look after you. And I think those are the things that kind of help you. And then you kind of get on the progression ladder. Yes, you've got to go and do you've got to do the games. You get assessed. You get the public criticism that goes with that. And you've always got to figure out, one of the key things from a refereeing progression perspective is figuring out which advice you get is the stuff to really listen to and to build on, and which bit you might hear a piece of advice and you go, all right, I'll take that, but it was either a blip or it's a one-off, and you can kind of park it or acknowledge. You can have the conversation in a really adult way, but then you can forget that piece of advice if you want to. But it's knowing how to do that and taking the whole big picture. Of course, as you get higher, you get to work with some really good referee coaches, which are great. You get a consistent input from those coaches, some great folk that I worked with over time, and then you actually get to talk to the club coaches. If I think back to my own career, I was really fortunate that when I was coming up through the RFU structure, it was at the same time as people like Danny Wilson, who was at London Welsh at the time, Rob Baxter and Exeter. So I refereed Exeter all the way through as they were coming up the league structure. I was going up the league structure. So you get to know these folk, and they're such brilliant rugby minds. Danny was great to talk to. We had a bit of a falling out one day where I got something completely wrong, and it was crucially wrong. And it was one of those things. We had a chat about it. I apologized to him. It was a big, huge call, and I clearly just in that moment I got it wrong, and it cost them potentially a really important stake, a key point for them. But yeah, it's all about relationships and taking what you can out of the whole thing.
Yeah. Can I talk to you a little bit about that, actually? Like when you have made a wrong decision, do you go to the coaches straight afterwards, or because I mean I've had advice myself if I've been in games, obviously maybe not as high profile as that, where I've made a mistake that's potentially cost one of the teams, possibly, which has happened. Sort of just my advice has always been, look, sort of go away, have your shower, get yourself changed that, then go to the clubhouse afterwards and just have a bit of a chat about it, and just let things cool down a bit. Do you take that approach as well, or do you wait coaches come up to you straight afterwards, or what?
It's a great question. Some of it needs to be about your own awareness about what's just happened. So when I talk about mistake, I'm talking about it's not opinion, it's fact. So that incident that I was talking about, I ended a game on a collapsed scrum. So set the scrum collapsed, thought, no, not going to reset that. I blew full time. There's no debate about that. That is a clear law error. There was no debate. There's no way getting out of that. I did it. Everyone accepted it. We got on with it. We got out. And as I walked back to the clubhouse, it dawned on me, and someone appeared in my ear saying, "Can you do that?" And then we realized very quickly that I shouldn't have done that. So that's getting things wrong, at which point straight away went to see Danny, talked to him and the chairman, who was absolutely bouncing off the walls at the time, rightly so. We had an adult conversation, but that's that. What you're talking about is debatable decisions, and the things with debatable decisions are perspective and the fact that you could both be right. But there's a debate to be had. I might see things one way, you might see things the other way, and we at some point we will both agree that we're right. And that's not a referee to a game perspective. Sometimes that's just the game, and that's angles and perspective. Depending, as the referee on the park, outside of the top two leagues that we all know about, you're on your own. You've got one view of something, and you make the best call.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can see from the position you've got yourself in at that very point. TV rugby is a different game altogether. We've got help. We've got external. We can stop the clock. We can look at it again. We can get more accurate decisions. But when we're talking about getting things wrong, you have to kind of understand. That's the tough debate. And sometimes that conversation needs to happen later in the week when you've looked at the video, when you've processed what's happened. I remember having quite a fallout with a championship coach in my sort of last couple of seasons, where he berated me as we came off the pitch. He then berated me in the paper to the media that evening and the following day. And then I get a phone call on Tuesday with an apology to say, look, I've watched the video and you were right on all the things I was angry about. I've looked at it again and you were right. And then I got the Thursday paper with the public apology kind of through the media stuff. And that's a massive that just shows the value of rugby when we can step away from it. Sometimes we will say we're wrong. And as a refereeing community, I think we're being more open about that and more, I'm not going to say transparent, because to the wider public, it's not as transparent, but within the close-knit circles of Premiership rugby or the elite rugby, there is a conversation that goes on behind closed doors, and we're fairly transparent about how that happens. And that makes us all better for it. I think there's a disconnect there slightly about how we involve the public in that conversation and who speaks for the refereeing perspective when you've got these big issues. And I've got views on the lack of support there sometimes, but that's just the nature of the beast. So yeah, it's a tricky one where you've got those conversations that need to be had. You need to reflect on your own performance and look at the games that you've refereed and say, well, how did it go? Was it okay? Did you facilitate a good game of rugby? Did you facilitate the right outcome of the game? And if you can hands up at the end of it and say, yeah, yes, we did, or I did my best and we did all right, then that's all most people will ask of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And you talk a bit about like with referees interacting with each other, and at the highest level, what do you make of that? Like, for instance, in the Six Nations, for example, when at the England-Wales game, pardon me, what's Pascal
Gauzet, yeah.
Gauzet, I do apologize for not pronouncing his last name correctly, but when Nigel Owens basically came out afterwards and said he was getting the wrong decision when he's already probably at the height of getting a bit of a public flack for the calls he made. Like, what do you make of that? I was a bit like, sort of, I'm not, should you be like, maybe wait a few weeks, Nigel, before you come out and say stuff like that? What are your thoughts there?
I think, look, everyone's got opinions on everything, haven't they? I mean, and we've got to remember that some people are paid for sharing those opinions. So Nigel's got his columns in the Wales Online and the Welsh papers, and the various other media, the media things that he's paid to do. So he's paid to have an opinion. Mm-hmm. If people make mistakes, I think that they're entitled to people are entitled to have views on them. I'd like there to be some moderation about it, mm-hmm. And some perspective about what happens and how it happens and how decisions are made, and that's sometimes where I think refereeing and the game doesn't quite support refereeing, because when you've got these big incidents happening, who can give the perspective? So obviously Pascal's in the middle of a game, so there's nothing to be done there, and you're not going to involve the people on the pitch. So therefore you've got to look for either experienced voices around it who can share those views, mm-hmm. Or somebody. I mean, football have gone down the line, haven't they, of having, is it Dermot Gallagher on the Premiership, former Premiership football referee, now on Sky Sports? We're starting to see more of that. Mm-hmm. There is also a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I know for sure happens in the BT sport world, in the English Premiership. They spend a lot of time during the week talking to referees, sometimes even sitting in on the review sessions that go on, to get an understanding about how refereeing decisions are made, the principles we're trying to address, the protocols and the thought processes that we come up with when we make decisions. But sometimes people just make mistakes because we're human. And I think if you've got those things happening, and I think if you go back to the England-Wales game that you talk about there, one of them was a debatable management decision. Mm-hmm. And I've seen plenty of opinions that say, well, perhaps England should have been aware of what was going on. Half the England squad
half of them were on lined up.
The half wasn't. So some people were aware of it and some people weren't. That's a management issue. That's not a law issue.
Yeah.
And how you do it, we would probably say, look at that from a refereeing community perspective and say, look, if you're going to ask people to deliver a message, that you need to make sure that the message has been delivered and everyone's ready before you restart play. The other issue, that the knock on, I think is a I'm not sure there's any grey in there. I was surprised there was that much debate. I think it was a clear knock on. And they came up with the outcome that it wasn't. So I think if you're going to make those decisions, we have to be accountable for them.
Yeah, the second one, I like. Well, hold my hands up. I was probably one of the I was one of the ones who was a bit in the grey of that, and then sort of looked a bit lower the law. It's like, yeah, if it does go forward off its hands, yeah, it's a knock on. So fair enough. He got that wrong. The first one, and the only thing I think he got wrong was that he should have called time on before he blew the whistle. He did it sort of the other way around, and that was my only gripe with him, because I thought the rest of it, England should have been more paying attention, because there were plenty lined up to the left, but at the right, they were just all at walking pace. So I think, yeah, I agree with you. It's more a management issue, but at the same time, you kind of think, like, if you've got players that left there, why aren't you paying more attention and being so naive on the right? So it's, but again, that's probably not our referee's problem, I don't think.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There is an expectation that match officials at that level will be 100% perfect.
Yeah.
And the moment they're not, the world falls apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where I get on slightly on my high horse, and slightly having these conversations just to try and get people to think slightly. Look, a referee at that level in that sort of game with that amount of pressure is probably making 2,000 decisions in a game of one type, decisions or non-decisions in a game. It's not possible to get all those right. It's just not. And there are 30 players on the pitch at any one point, plus all the squads that back up. So potentially 40 other 50 other people involved in that game outside of that one individual. And they are all going to make mistakes. And when they make a mistake, the world doesn't fall apart. Mm-hmm. When one person makes one debatable mistake, the world caves in. Yeah. I think we've got to remember that we've got humans involved, and humans aren't fallible. They train as hard as as people, as we all do in our day jobs, to be as good as we are. But sometimes when you put in the hot spot and you're under that amount of pressure, sometimes the brain doesn't function as well as it could. The outcome, you don't get into the best position to make the right outcome, and things just happen. That's just physics, and being on a big bit of grass, there'll be some physical elements to it as well. It doesn't happen as well as you want it to, and sometimes the 100% accuracy that everyone seems to want falls away. And I think people need to accept that sometimes, and just get on with it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think social media as well also inflames a lot of that, and the media in general, just that kind of stuff always seems to just amplified. And you can go through any game, there's always because it's Nigel Owens himself has said that you can't go through a whole game of referee without making at least one mistake at all. It's absolutely impossible. And you could go through any game, there's probably always, especially with all the different laws and different interpretations around the breakdown and the mauls and such, you could always take little bits to say, oh, this player's offside there, or he's dragging him back there, or just little things. And sometimes, again, slow motion footage I think can come into that as well, because I find that can often make situations look worse than they are. I don't know what your opinions on that are.
I mean, look, I'm involved. I'm a television match official in the Premiership, so slow mo both scares me and is a great help sometimes. But the other thing that people forget is that they're watching from a camera that's in the middle of the pitch, and probably then they're making massive decisions and judgments watching based on a camera that's not straight.
Yeah.
So they're looking at something that might appear to be offside, but when you actually look at the frame, it's not. And I think back, and the other thing that people don't realize is that what the director, and there's nothing to do with refereeing, what the director and how the director behaves and what their particular preferences will also impact what you're watching.
Yeah.
And you might have to just listen to what I'm going to say, and then when you're next watching a game, either tonight or over the weekend, whenever it might be, think about what I said and then how that reflects. But we have some TV directors who like to go in to out. So they're like a nice tight shot, and at some point they'll then flick to the wide camera. Mm-hmm. And there are others who do the opposite. They'll start out wide and then they'll show you a close-in camera, and they have a style about what they like to produce, the TV show that they're trying to produce. That can really distort the images that you're looking at. Mm-hmm. There was a brilliant clip. What was the game? It was in Ireland and it was against England. And there was if you remember, I think it was Jack Noel off a line out, took one quick and burst through. I'm not sure if he quite scored. No, I think he did. I think England did score off the line out. But to all intents and purposes, Jack Noel looked to be offside because he'd come up so quickly and he caught the ball either off the top or he caught it on the 15-meter line.
Okay.
And you look at that and go, yes, clearly offside. And then you see the next shot, and actually he doesn't move until the ball is well over. He doesn't start for a good considerable amount of time, and he's 100% legal. So camera angles can sometimes distort because of where they are. If you're thinking about, I'm pointing like this, like, or your podcast listeners won't get that, but they're over the stand. It might be a low gallery, it might be quite high, and what you see and which angles you look at will distort the reality. And a clear forward pass is shown from an angle from a camera that's not in line, but it's like 40 meters back and zoomed in. So you get some slight distortions on the cameras because they're fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as I was saying earlier, the photos and the other video footage manipulates that a bit as well. And then open to interpretation there. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying about the cameras totally. I was wanting to talk to you a bit about RugbyRefereenet, how you got started with that, and also a bit about Advantage Over podcast.
Yeah, sure.
What you do there.
Yeah, so all the way through my refereeing, so as I said before, my job is social media, and I've always been interested in blogging from a professional perspective and that sort of thing. So I'd started a blog, sort of refblog.co.uk. I started just to blog as a referee, just no expectation of anyone reading it. It's just a sort of way of starting to create some content and reflect on the games that I'd done. And I remember doing a post about that incident with London Welsh where I messed up. So that sort of thing. And then, so when I stopped refereeing, I came off the panel, sort of life took over. I wasn't going to get into the Premiership. So I said, look, it's time with family and had children. So it's time for me to take a step back from refereeing. And I thought, well, at that point, I'd been really critical as a communicator of the way that the game supports referees. If you are wanting to actually go and find a piece of law advice, or to find even a local referee society back then, it was hard work. As a referee in the game for a long time, I wasn't getting information through the system about law changes or whatever it is. And things have improved massively since then with things like that. But back then, I was really critical of the way that the game supports referees, because it's really hard work. So I thought, I'll set up Rugby Referee. I'll set up a website. Let's try and get as much information about refereeing into one place. We can do appointments. We can do a bit of blogging, and I can kind of, as I'm no longer a referee within the RFU system, I'm a bit freer to have opinions and views. So I set it up, just started to get it going. And then I got a call from the RFU system. At the time, they were investing more in the TMO. They wanted more TMOs to come into the game because the BT Sport deal had been done. I think it was BT Sport. Yes, they wanted to have TMOs in every game, not just the 2 or 3 that were on TV over a weekend. So they needed, therefore, more TMOs. And I was asked to join the TMO panel, which then put me back in the system. But I've still created the website. It's still hopefully a resource for people to go to if they're either a fan, they want to know who the referee appointments are for the week. They're all there, and I cover the sort of main, if I can get them. I do the appointments for the Premiership, and the Championship, and the Women's Premiership in England, the Pro 14, SIUs to send me them when the SIU leagues were going, MLR sometimes if I can get them, Top 14, Super Rugby, World Rugby appointments. They're all there, and it's just that I do a weekly post on a Thursday night that says these are the referee appointments as far as we're aware for the following weekend. Or for the coming weekend. So that's a good resource. But then also when law changes happen, we kind of touch on that, put the post out, or aid the facts, and then some guidance for referees to do that. And then I've been interested in podcasting as well for years. I always thought about podcasting. I always listened to podcasts. I've always followed those since they were a thing. And again, I really felt and still do feel that there's a great conversation to be had around refereeing. So I started a podcast. I've done 30 or 32 episodes, something like that.
I think
talking to some great people. I need to do more. I'm not consistent with it, and I'd love to. It's just that life and time, it takes time to do these things. You know that as a podcaster. But I've had some really great conversations. I have some really good people. Obviously, I know some folks. So talking to Wayne Barnes, Craig Joubert when he was over.
Good friend of us north of the border.
I'm familiar with his work and your opinions. We had a great chat about Sevens, Alhambra Nevis, who was the first woman to become International Referee of the Year, now works for World Rugby. So I had some fantastic conversations with people, but also just grassroots. We had a great conversation with a new referee to talk about what it's like to be a new referee, because I'm 20 years on from that debate and discussion. So I had a great chat there. I've just done one with a psychologist, which is I need to get edited and put live. So some really good conversations. So I want to build up the Advantage Over podcasts, trying to talk about more refereeing, to help referees to get refereeing. That's the thing. Obviously, all people like audio. Lots of people at referees, it's a lonely business sometimes. And when you're traveling to your game as a local society, I just wanted to create something that they could listen to in the journey, get them to think about refereeing, hear a different voice, hear a different, or some from some of the top guys and girls out there and their views and how they've done it, a bit of inspiration, and do that. So yes, that's the Advantage Over podcast and the website, and it's kind of just ambling along quite nicely. We've got a really good Facebook group. I restrict that one to just match officials, for people who are involved in refereeing. There's some others people have snuck in along the way as well. But again, it's really difficult sometimes for referees to find a safe place to have that conversation amongst ourselves. And we have you've seen some of the conversations that we have in there. Sometimes it's really difficult for us to agree amongst ourselves as referees about particular situations. Sometimes the law book is helpful and sometimes it's not. There are some holes in the law book. And I've got a feed into World Rugby if we identify some of those issues about what the outcome should be, because there are I'm not a lawyer by any means, but there are people who will look at the law as a lawyer and try and analyze what is it written, how is it written, what does it actually say, and what does it mean to say. And sometimes those two are different. And if referees are having that thought process, then sure, coaches are having that conversation. And there's sometimes a really small, over the years, the law book's been slimmed back because it was quite a mammoth tome at one point. And they stripped it back to kind of cut out some of the superfluous language. But in doing that for 3 or 4 years ago, we've lost some of that black and whiteness that used to be there. And they always said back then, it was in stripping the law book back, it was designed to cut words out, not to change law. That's really difficult. If you're reading the law book for the first time in its new guise, you haven't got the history that goes with how it's come about and where it comes back to. So sometimes we have to go back to the pre-cut book to understand what it does say, what it meant to say, and how it could be. And we kind of have a feed into World Rugby if we spot some holes there. But there's some really good conversations that we have amongst referees. So I want to keep that as a referee community. So on Facebook, so RugbyRefereenet community group, there are some sort of qualifying questions I asked to show that people are referees before I let them in. But there's some really good conversation. It's kind of there's some debate that goes on. There's some strong opinion as in any group, and that's a good thing. And then we've got the public stuff. Advantage Out, the podcast is public; anyone can listen to that, and the website itself is public domain as well.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of them. One of them, the one you have with Craig Joubert, but I didn't listen to all of it. But I mean, it was sounding good. So yeah, I'll leave a link to that below, and obviously all viewers can check it out at their own convenience.
Yeah. And what I say, if anyone listening is a referee and there are particular things you would like to hear from on a refereeing based podcast, let me know, because it's only my little side hustle. So if you've got ideas or people you think would tell a great story, then I'll talk to anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if they're not a referee, I think it's some very educational pieces, and a lot to learn. Even if you're just like passionate about the game and you're just like wanting to learn more, just in general, I think it's always helpful. But yeah, I mean, I was going to get onto that bit now with regards to the laws, and obviously how much they've changed since how much they've changed since you started refereeing without question, and just how they seem to keep changing and evolving all the time. Do you think they go a little bit too fast, or the right speed, or sort of again depending on certain things about the game in regards to safety and that? What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I think the stuff in recent years is important from a safety perspective. Look, there's no doubt about it. We're trying to make the game needs to become a bit safer. If you look at some of those what we call historical rugby matches that aren't that long ago. So looking even back to the pre-Lions, we've got Lions coming up this summer. There'll be reruns of previous Lions games coming up. And when you look at games and you go, blimey, that's just, it's clearly not safe with the head contacts, the charging ins and all that kind of stuff. So I think that lots of the changes that have been made recently have been done for exactly the right reason. Rugby and the pandemic probably isn't helping here, because rugby hasn't had quite a lot of time to play lots of rugby, obviously the last 12 to 13, 14 months. And what we've seen on TV is it's going to take some time for the rest of the world to catch up in how the game happens. And it might be helpful, actually, that people are coming back in the return to rugby versions, having to sort of reset themselves from a club rugby perspective. But I think in from a safety perspective, the way the elite game has gone, the direction of travel is clear. I think there is a debate to be had amongst the wider rugby world about how comfortable we are that we have two versions of the game. I think undoubtedly now we've seen that the head injury, that the high contact sanction framework and the shoulder charges to the head, the recent changes that we've got about head to head contact, you can only really make those decisions with a TMO. As a community-based referee, when I'm going out to referee Portsmouth Vets or Portsmouth 2s or 3s, whatever it might be, or the kids at Havant on a Sunday morning, I'm on my own. I've got one view, and it's an experienced view, and I'm not going to be able to make a decision on what has led to what. The TMO, we've had the TMO now in the game since 1999, so we're a long time into the TMO process. And we've kind of accepted that we have a different game at the elite where they've got television match officials who can stop the game and we can watch stuff again. And we've been comfortable with that for a while. I think we're getting to a stage now where more is being done, which can only now be done at that level. I've got a little bit of concern about some of the changes that we're seeing trialed many only seen them in Super Rugby, about restarts and goal line dropouts and kicks ahead, because you've got to I know I'm a bit rusty on some of the trials that we've had about if you kick the ball out, depending on where you kick it as to whether you get the gaining ground, who gets the ball. And I think that only works if you've got qualified assistant referees. Again, thinking of the community game, that ain't going to work for me on my own on a Saturday afternoon in the gloom of Blackheath or whatever it might be.
Sorry, Keith, one of my issues with that is the whole thing with, you're talking about the trials of the Rainbow Cup that are going on, like it's the kick through thing. I find that can be open to a lot of different interpretation as to what constitutes a kick through.
So I think the kicking through bit is clear. It's how you can tell from a refereeing perspective when you're on your own who has kicked it from where and where it's gone out. There's a lot to process there when you're refereeing a Vets game or a seconds or thirds or a club rugby game, versus if you've got a fully assistant referees on the side to help you get those two different views. So I think they're good in it. I get why they're doing it. They're trying to open up the game, trying to reduce the big collisions, and by pulling people out of the back line to defend those kicks, you're reducing the big collision type stuff. So I get the principle. I don't think we've seen enough yet at the community game to warrant just to see how that's going to be actually refereed. I'm not sure that's happening. That's not happening in the Rainbow Cup, is it?
Well, the trial with the goal line dropout and
goal line dropout. I mean, that's fairly straightforward because it's who takes it into in goal rather than having a 22 dropout. It's a goal line dropout. So I think the print or the ball held up over the line. So I think that's really straightforward. You think about, you may not have picked it up because we never saw it in the Northern Hemisphere, but there are some other trials that were going on about balls being kicked into touch as to who gets the line out.
Yeah.
So an attacking, I think one of them was an attacking, if you're outside your 22 and it bounces into touch, you can have the line, then you maintain the line out rather than it goes the other way. So it's quite complex. So it's probably one for another day, but there's lots going on in the law. But fundamentally, going back to your law question, what's happening is trying to make the game safer for those participants, because unfortunately we've had fatalities, we've had serious injuries. I think there's still some work to be done around the crocodile roll and how it's refereed. I just don't like it. But as it stands at the moment, I'm not sure it's illegal.
Yeah, no, it's I've got a slightly different opinion. Well, I have a different opinion to there, because I think the crocodile roll is not all that dangerous if it's done properly. I understand the incident you might be referring to is the incident with the Jack Willis injury.
Well, there's any number of injuries that have been caused by that. I mean, there's plenty of them.
Well,
but
yeah,
it's
yeah,
that.
yeah. But I was going to get to the actual injury he got. I mean, you see the footage. It wasn't because of the crocodile roll. It's because Negri failed to make the clear out properly, and then when he was on the ground, he dragged Willis across. Like, obviously not intentionally to injure him as he did, sort of more an instinctive thing to try and get him off the ball after the failed clear out. And that's where, like, I don't think it's the roll itself. It's more like if a player's on the ground and they shouldn't be playing the opponent anyway. But yeah, so I mean, I think if it's done properly, it's not all that dangerous. But it's just yeah, that's
you've got to remember what even that happening at the elite level just wouldn't happen at the community game, because the players aren't strong enough, they're not speedy enough, they're not skilled enough to get into those positions anyway. But of course, that at the top end of the community game, we're starting to get into much more professionalism, much fitter, skilled players as they're growing up the rugby food chain. So they're becoming things like that. And I think we've got to figure out how we stop that danger element there. But I think on the whole, laws always change. Laws have always changed as I've come through. Things are always changing and tweaking. On the whole, they make for a better game, and a game that people can buy into. I think it's the challenge. I think we've got a bigger challenge as a game now, is that we need to get back to rugby. We've got to figure out how we do that in a safe way. I think it's going to take some time to get back to rugby as we knew it 2019 style. But how we get back to the game and how we make sure that players are safe and can do so. They've had a long time out now, and so have referees. We will have lost referees throughout the game by virtue of them having 14 months off. And they're just not going to come back. And that's we are as a local refereeing group, we're concerned that we keep people fit, we keep people interested in the game, and we've got referees out there refereeing games that people want to play. And that's the bigger challenge for rugby, is getting people back out there playing any form of rugby where it is, and of course then supplying referees to it.
Yeah, I was going to give you the next question really about the pandemic. And I mean, because I can speak from my own point of view. I'm one of those who've not refereed for 14 months or so. And as you were saying, there's going to be like many referees up and down the whole world who are going to be on the same boat. But what's it been like for yourself? Have you been keeping busy with refereeing or TMOing, etc.?
I'm fully acknowledge I'm in a really privileged position in that I have been the Premiership has been kept going all the way through. I have been involved in some of those games. I was involved in a game in Coventry on Sunday, so it's great for me to do that. It's kept my eye in from a mental perspective. Obviously TMOing is not a physical activity, although the stress levels and the heartbeat would suggest otherwise. Sometimes. I've actually done that. I've worn a heart monitor on a couple of occasions, and it's quite an interesting tracker as to see what goes on. I think it showed that I'd done in one game that wasn't particularly stressful or strenuous, but I think I'd done about, I think it said I'd burnt about 600 or 700 calories.
Just by sitting watching
watching TV.
Wow.
Because you're still refereeing as a TMO, you're still refereeing the game. You have to referee it from your seat, and the pressure of refereeing it and making those peaks where you've got to make a decision anyway. So yeah, a really privileged position. Many people listening here just won't have done anything. They've been trying to keep in watching what's going on TV. We've sort of had the hesitant returns. Again, I'm in a really fortunate position. I've got kids, so the kids have been back training, so I've been helping out with those just to get out there and get moving. But yeah, we had a good session on the podcast with referee specific trainer Ross Hambry, giving people tips and advice for just getting out there and doing some referee specific drills and training, and getting them heads back in the game. And I would always encourage anyone out there, get down to a club. If the clubs are training, get down there and either run around with them, offer to help, do it's called Ready for Rugby here. I don't know whether you guys have got a version, a COVID safe version. Are you calling it?
Yeah, it's like Rugby Ready and
Rugby Ready.
Well, it's along those lines, but there's obviously been the COVID questionnaires that have gone alongside that. it's been a few months since I've done them, so
wherever you are in the world listening to this, there'll be a version of something that looks like, with involving a rugby ball that's being played. It won't be like we're used to, but it will still need you to call, touch, or tackle, or play the ball, or whatever it is, and just start to get your body back into refereeing and your mind back into refereeing, remembering how to communicate when we're approaching a breakdown and delivering messages to players. That's going to take some time. So yeah, get back down to your club. I'm sure they'd value any involvement they can. I'm getting calls from the boys club to say, can you referee some touch or tag rugby, touch, and then some rugby ready for rugby stuff in the next couple of weeks. So that'd be good. And then hopefully come the new season, September, we should be, from an England perspective, I think we're expecting the pathway to be open for rugby to resume. So that'll be good. I mean, we need to be ready for September. Fingers crossed.
Absolutely. I mean, fingers crossed, because obviously times we live in right now, there's a lot of unpredictability around. You can't really hard to call that there. But no, I mean, obviously going into that, like, I was going to say, like, what you're saying of the future of the game and refereeing in general, we've probably covered some of it already, but with regards to referees getting themselves back fit and where referees are going, what are your thoughts on that? Pardon me if I've gone on a bit there.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, look, I think refereeing was in a really strong place. I actually think world rugby and the elite rugby and referees at that level are in a really good place. I mean, if you look around the elite, and of course people will have views when you start talking about names, people have views. But you look at the group that started at World Cup, who came through World Cup in Japan. You've got a really good group of referees involved there who've got 4 or 5 years, 6 or 4 to 8 years ahead of them. You've got Luke Pearce, who's clearly on the up. Nick Berry's having a great season in Super Rugby. Paul Williams and Ben O'Keefe, really steady referees. They'll be good. You've got new folk coming onto the scene as well. You've got Nika Amashvili from Georgia, and it's great to see Nika coming into the frame. You've got Mike up in your patch. But not forget, we've also got some really great female officials doing a fantastic job in the men's game, which I think is awesome. Amy Perrott now doesn't even get a mention as being a referee, but she's broken into Super Rugby Australia. The rest of the crew, so Joy Neville at that level, Holly Davison just in her first Pro 14, and it's just amazing to see those ladies officiating in the men's game, and no one cares, and it's brilliant. Sarah Cox in England did a championship game at the start of the season. I think it was Sarri's first game down in Cornish Pirates. Wasn't announced. It was just on the team sheet. There was no reaction, no nothing. It was that for me was brilliant, because it didn't need a press release. It wasn't Sarah's the first female. It wasn't the first female. She's done loads of championship games. It was just a top level appointment for a top level official, and it's great to see that happening. So I think actually the strength of the refereeing game. I think that the unions have got their talent grids in place now. I mean, you guys up north of the border, we haven't seen a Scottish name on an international list for quite some time now. Suddenly we got 2 or 3.
Mike Adamson did England, Italy. So
yeah, it's great, isn't it? I mean, it's great to have Mike there. I was worried a bit during his COVID, because he lost 2 games, didn't he, on the bounce, where he should have done games, which were then COVIDed off with the Barbar. It was the Barbars game he was supposed to do. And then I think, did he have one in either France or Italy that got canned as well? So I thought he was being unlucky, but it's great to see him get those games. And the pipeline's coming. It's not coming from the usual suspects. South African top pipeline seems to be okay as well. We'll see where that goes. They're a bit isolated at the moment, given the geography and the pandemic. So I think that's good. We've just got to work on the rest of the game to make sure we're getting people coming into refereeing for the right reasons. I have a little bit of concern that we're now, and I see it through the website and some of the questions that I get in through my email list, for people who are coming into the game because they want to be a professional referee. And you kind of go, well, why? Because I want to be like Nigel, and I want to be the next Nigel, and that's brilliant. But there is only one Nigel, and there isn't going to be another version of him. Yeah. Is it like broke the cast? There's his grog on my shelf behind me. I think we've just got to make sure that people are coming into the game, they're coming in to do it for the right reasons, and that's to make the game that we've got to do brilliant. And that's not a ref to be. I don't want to be in rugby to be a professional referee beyond my era now, but just got to make sure people are coming into it for the right reasons. They're learning in an appropriate way. They're not being fast tracked because they're 19. They need to be fast tracked because they're 19 and a good referee.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a core thing. And sometimes, like if I go back to going back to what I said about me, it took me 10 years to get to the national panel. Sometimes you need 10 years of experience and doing all the rugby to get to the level that you need to get to. Sometimes if you're a Christoph Ridley or you're a Craig Maxwell Keys, you can go into it having played at a reasonable level. You can do it in 2 or 3 or 4 years. The guys who are turning pro and going into refereeing are doing it in 2. Carl Dixon went from Quinn's number 9 to international referee in 3 seasons.
Yeah,
he did a lot of pre-work before then. There's more to the Carl's refereeing story than that instant switch. He did 3 or 4 seasons before that.
Can I ask you a little bit about that? Because I remember a few years ago he stirred up a bit Carl Dixon when he said like, "Oh, I'm a lot fitter now." He was meaning more aerobically, of course. I'm a lot fitter now as a referee than I was as a player. And then he had a few. James Haskell, I think, was still playing at the time. There's others as well who got a bit like, really, you think that? I mean, what are your thoughts on that there?
I think it's a different kind of fitness when you don't have to do the contact stuff, when you're not involved in those collisions and everything that goes into that, and the strength and the weights and the training, you can then train to do the job that you're doing. So undoubtedly, I think Carl's stats probably show that he is fitter, according to a Bronco test or whatever the test is that they're all being done.
Yeah.
Than he was when he was playing. But is he fitter from a playing perspective? I don't know, because he's not a player anymore. But so yeah, look, it doesn't matter as long as you are capable of doing the job that you're there to do, either as a player or as a match official. Then it doesn't matter what type of fitness it is. You're there to do a job.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think like the thing is like fitness as well is like it's obviously very key, and I think you'll agree with me here. The fitter you are, the better you're going to be overall, 100%. both mentally and physically.
There's a great point. Mental fitness for refereeing is something that is not trained. You don't train for that. You just develop it. And there are ways of training for that. And we had a good conversation with the psychologist that I'll put on the podcast in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, that can be where people fall over as referees. They get to a particular level, and it's the psychological side of it that lets them down, not the physical or the game understanding. So yeah, it's something that we all need to develop over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably one of the things when I referee, like sometimes I like sort of get a bit panicky, especially if it's a tight game and there's like you'll know yourself when it's a tight game going to the last 20 minutes or so. There's always a lot of tension about. There's a bit more shouting of the sidelines, like sort of there's a lot more animation. But just like sometimes I've had that problem, just being able to just control that sense of like, okay, just keep your cool, like make sure you're just going by the objective. Like, would you have any advice for that for myself or any referee, for example?
I'm very much, I was always, and I think still do, I'd never affected by the pressure, visibly affected by it, and that's part of the thing, is how you externalize it, how you internalize it, so that people around you don't notice there's an issue. And that when you can sometimes, it tends not to happen too much on TV rugby, but when you're watching a local referee down the park, you can see that he's in trouble or she's in trouble. And that's the kill thing. I think there are some things that I developed over time, some of which were just reset options. Let's say we talk about we hear that on the player's perspective, but I used to do it. I used to have, in the second half, I used to set my watch to beep at me every 10 minutes. So I had those points where I just had the focus of my watch beeping at 10 minutes that I could do. I get my AARs to give me a 10-minute time check, whatever it might be. But those sort of things just ground you back in the focus points that you're not calm, or it's when you recognize yourself that your shoulders are going, or you've just taken a knock somewhere, or you've got into the wrong position, or you've taken a bit of a tumble, you need to get your head back in the game. And so I'm not great at talking about this sort of thing, but that sort of positive self-talk, that thing where you say, look, get your head up, Keith, 10 minutes to go, sort yourself out, that's enough. Sometimes that's enough. You don't have to say it, but you need to think it and recognize that you need to step up your game. That's actually more helpful when you've got a coach there with you, or you've got assistant referees who you've worked with before, and they can sometimes just tell. I used to love working with the same people, because I could tell if somebody wasn't quite right, and you could just say, focus, head on, look at the scoreboard. That side's just scored 3 points. They've just scored. That's their third try. That doesn't mean anything to anyone listening, but that third try means that the next try is a bonus point, and it just focuses the mind on what the game is about to become, or the game has become, and get you back into it. So it's really easy to talk about, but really hard to deliver when you're on the pitch. And it's something you either have to develop, or you have to work out for yourself what impacts you and how you stop yourself getting dragged into situations around you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I generally agree with all of that. And again, just with development, really, and just practice, and again, I know you'll agree with me with this. Just keep going, even if you have like a bad first few games, like just keep telling yourself, okay, like look at where I think you're improving. Like, because one of my earlier coaches gave this bit of advice to me, which I thought was great advice, is like, don't try and overload yourself in your early days. Just take like two bits of the game.
Yeah,
where you think you take 2 bits you think you did well, and 2 bits you maybe think you can improve on, and then just focus on the positives, and then look at the 2 bits and say, okay, this is where I need to improve on. Like, go for that, use that into the next game, and then the sort of same pattern kind of repeats.
That's exactly right. And some of that self-analysis, and if anyone does anyone listens or reads to anything about personal development in your professional lives, I've heard a lot more recently about things that's called gratitude journaling. I don't do that. It's a little bit airy-fairy for my liking, but the principle of it is you write down 2 or 3 things that you're grateful for or have gone well, and that automatically refocuses the mind into a more positive mindset than dwelling on the scrum that didn't go right, or you got bumped there. Think about that great piece of advantage that you played that just led to that try, not the fact that you may arguably have got something debatable wrong or right, whatever it might be. So just focusing on some of those little positive things, or perhaps having a plan. Did the game, or is the game going towards your plan? And then you can hang your performance and your mindset around that plan and the positive side of things. So it's another little thing that people can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's all my questions I've got, but I think I'll end on just another way of trying to inspire anyone who's thinking of refereeing, or looking to get into refereeing. Any extra advice you give? Go down to the clubs, look online, just chat to other referees, advice, all that.
Just if anyone's got even half a thought about doing it, please just give it a go. And now's a great time, isn't it? Because there's very little at stake for us. There's just an opportunity to get down and do some tag or touch or referee some training sessions or whatever it might be, to get yourself going. Because frankly, I mean, it's the old cliche, isn't it? There is no game without a referee.
Yeah.
And that's 100% true. Somebody will have to referee the game. So if you've got half a mind to it, you're already half a mind more than a lot of people. A little bit of training, a little bit of guidance, and there's plenty of folk out there. Come and join us on RugbyRefereenet and the various elements. Listen to the podcast. Give somebody a shout at your local referee society, wherever you're listening to in the world. Somebody will be there to help you. Come and find us on if you're struggling to find somebody. Someone did this just this afternoon. Someone sent us a note to the referee, RugbyRefereenet Facebook page. They sent us a private message, and I've already put them in touch with somebody at the local society. I'll do the grunt work for you. If you need a contact, I probably know someone somewhere in the world who can help. So yeah, just give us a shout, but give it a go. It's a great way of staying involved in the game. If the pandemic has meant that you've realized that your playing days are now over and you're looking to stay involved, then look, there's a great opportunity for you. We need you with a whistle or a flag or a coach, whatever it might be. There's an opportunity for you. So yeah, give it a go. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you also touched it a bit earlier. Make sure you're getting involved in the right reasons. I think you said like why you've got involved in it. I mean, I got involved in it because instead of I thought, you know what, instead of just me giving my opinions on rugby all the time and just like trying to come across, I mean, I can still try and come across as a bit of a smart arse sometimes, I'm not gonna lie there, but just generally just thinking, okay, I want to do more here, like get myself back into the game. I mean, again, you talk about the aspiring to be like Nigel Owens thing. I admit I had that myself when I started, but I was just also kind of thinking, you know what? Even if I don't make it to the very top, I'm giving something back to the game, and I'm doing something because I enjoy doing it, and it's helping. It's a great way for fitness as well. I find,
Okay.
you know, a great motivator for that. So yeah, I mean, I think that's all the points I was going to make there, really. So
Fantastic.
Yeah. Got anything else you want to add, Keith, before we finish up?
No, that's great. I'll give them the site plenty of plugs. I'm not hard to find if anyone does want to talk about refereeing or want to ask questions. If you've got law questions, if any listeners have got any questions about the game or the law or queries, we'll always try and help you out. So yeah, just get in touch. We're not hard to find.
Yeah, all the information will be, as I've said before, all in the descriptor below, for anyone listening. And yeah, that's all I've really got to say. Thanks very much, Keith, for coming on. Much appreciated.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, and thanks very much for listening, guys. Hope you were educated, you enjoyed listening, and you've stuck around for the whole thing. But yeah, meantime, take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you later on.